Yo, what up, fellow Shackhousers? It's your boy, Cy Shackleford here. It's a beautiful Saturday, if not very cold outside. Today, I'm going to give you something I've been promising you guys. Oh, yeah, the upside down like Stranger Things. I thought I'd try something new today. Today, I'm going to give you guys something that I've been meaning to give you for several weeks now. A rundown on the Eternals. Now, if you saw the movie, forget whatever you saw in the movie, alright? Forget whatever you saw in the movie. Those are like three different Eternals rolled into one. I'm going to give you the real story of the Eternals. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. Peace.
The history of the Eternals. The Eternals are an evolutionary offshoot of humanity living on Earth who possess greater powers and longer lifespans than the mainstream human race. The Eternals first came into being about 1 million years ago when the extraterrestrial Celestials arrived on Earth to perform genetic experiments on the nascent human race. To test the adaptability of the human gene, the Celestials accelerated the evolution of a handful of subjects and gave them the genetic potential to mentally manipulate limited quantities of cosmic energy, as well as other superhuman traits. Thus, the Celestials created the race of Eternals. The Celestials also performed experiments on Earth that led to the creation of the genetically unstable Deviants, who are slightly related to the Eternals, and to the implantation of latent genetic material in the general run of humanity's ancestors that would one day permit benevolent mutations in human beings, like Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and mutants like the X-Men. At first, the Eternals' genetic potential for extraordinarily long lifespans and virtual invulnerability due to cosmic energy lay dormant, though they possessed enhanced physical prowess and semi-longevity. A devastating civil war eventually broke out among the first generation of Eternals. The two opposing factions, one led by Cronus and the other led by his brother, Uranus, clashed in a conflict of ideologies over their people's destiny. Cronus' side prevailed, and the warlike Uranus and his surviving band of followers were exiled into outer space. The exiles found an abandoned military outpost left by the alien Kree on the planet now known as Uranus and used it to construct a spaceship in which they attempted to return to Earth and renew their war with their brethren. However, 4 Eternals stayed on Uranus and gave rise to colonies of Uranian Eternals. During the 20th century, the Eternals welcomed German scientist Horace Grayson and his infant son Bob to live among them. As an adolescent, Bob was sent back to Earth as their ambassador, Marvel Boy, operating as a superhero during the 1950s, at which time the Uranian colony and all of its inhabitants were destroyed via natural disasters. While the 4 Eternals remained on Uranus behind to colonize it, Uranus and his followers were attacked by a Kree armada while they were en route to Earth. The survivors among Uranus' band crash-landed on Saturn's moon, Titan, and built a civilization there of Titanian Eternals. One of Uranus' followers, Aflok, was taken by the Kree for vivisection. When they learned that the being was derived from Earth, the Kree determined to perform genetic experiments on Earth's prehumans themselves. Their experiments, though they later abandoned them, would result in the Inhumans. Much later, Cronus was working in his laboratory in the Earth Eternal city of Titanos on an experiment with cosmic energy when he accidentally caused an explosion that demolished Titanos and subjected the Eternals of Earth to a cosmic particle bombardment. This irradiation activated the latent genes in the Earth Eternals that gave them their long lifespans, virtual invulnerability, their power to manipulate cosmic energy that bolsters their life force and enables them to pass these genes down to their children produced by any mated couple of Earth Eternals. Cronus, he was caught in the midst of the explosion, so his atoms were scattered, but his astral form was expanded to godlike proportions and survives on this plane of reality. After Cronus' physical death, his eldest sons, Zuras and Alars, they initiated the creation of the first Unimind. While in the form of the Unimind, the Eternals determined that Zuras should be Cronus' successor and their leader. To avoid disunity among the Eternals, Alars, who differed from his brother as to what the Eternals' destiny should be, he left for outer space. Eventually, Alars arrived on Titan, where he made it with Suisan, who was the last survivor of a civil war among the first generation of Titanian Eternals there. Together, Alars and Suisan repopulated Titan. However, since Suisan was not present on Earth during Cronus' cosmic energy explosion, The children she had with Mentor were not as powerful or as long-lived as the Eternals of Earth, but they were stronger and longer-lived than the Eternals that previously lived on Titan. Alars renamed himself Mentor, and the race of Titanian Eternals, which includes his sons, Eros and Thanos, although recently greatly reduced in number, their society still exists today. Zuras, he directed the construction of the principal city of Eternals, Olympia, in a mountainous region in Greece. 2 other Eternal cities were founded, major Eternal cities, Polaria in Siberia and Oceania in the Pacific Ocean. Many Eternals have lived among ordinary human beings over the centuries. Now, the city of Olympia, it lay near the principal nexus point between Earth's dimension and that of the Olympian gods on Mount Olympus. Now, Zuras and Zeus, the main deity of the Olympian gods, they made a mutual non-interference pact between their 2 races. The people of ancient Greece and Roma often confused the Olympian Eternals with the Olympian gods because of their close physical resemblances. Over the centuries, the Eternals have continuously fought the Deviants' attempts to regain their power. In later years, the 4th host of the Celestials, they arrived on Earth to judge humanity, and fearing that the Celestials would destroy Earth if they judged against his people, Zuras led the Eternals against the Celestials, who retaliated by killing him. The Celestials, they judged in Earth's favor and left Earth with 12 humans who represent the human being's greatest potential. Now, Zuras' daughter, Thena, she contacted Zuras' spirit before it left this plane of reality, and thus learned that the Eternals were to leave Earth to explore outer space now that the Celestials had departed. Virtually all of Earth's Eternals have left for outer space in the form of a Unimind or individually. However, the Eternals' collective consciousness in the Unimind decreed that a small number of Eternals were particularly involved in earthly matters should remain behind. Among the Eternals known to live on Earth are Thena, who's the Prime Eternal, Icarus, Circe, Makari, the Forgotten One, Kingo, Susan, Sprite, Cybele, Phastos, Coryphica, and Interloper. What are the powers of the Eternals? Well, the Eternals' bodily cells contain cosmic energy, and they maintain constant mental control over every molecule of their bodies. Eternals are virtually immortal and can be restored to life even if the molecules of their bodies are scattered. All Eternals possess the capacity for superhuman strength, telepathy, flight, teleportation, illusion casting, transmutation of organic and inorganic matter, and the generation of various forms of energy from their bodies, including force, heat, light, and other electromagnetic radiation. Some Eternals have devoted themselves to specializing in a particular facet of their powers and can increase their proficiency in one area by decreasing their power in another. For example, Circe is very powerful in the area of molecular manipulation, while she may be deficient in other areas like telepathy. Makari, his ability is super speed, but he may be deficient in matter manipulation, and so forth. The Eternal who serves as the Prime Eternal can generate blue flame that will merge anyone who passes through it into a Unimind, a powerful psychic entity which embodies the collective power of every individual Eternal who creates it. A Unimind requires the participation of at least 7 Eternals in order to succeed. Yeah, right. That was the old history, before the 3rd Eternal series that came out in 2008 by Neil Gaiman, and later writers who gave us another one of those everything you know is wrong retcons. Now the history involves the addition of the Machine, or Great Machine as it calls itself, and that changes everything. But what is the Great Machine? The Machine is an artificial intelligence forged by celestial technology, insofar as it pertains to the Celestials' design for the planet. It sees itself as the Earth's maintenance system and operating system, and it provides utility support for the Eternals in their roles as protectors of the Earth from the proliferation of the Deviants. Yeah, the retcon was deliberately vague, but just enough to allow Gaiman to take the Eternals in a new direction without worrying about past continuity. Anyway, the history was now as follows. The mechanism was that Sprite, he's an antagonist who turned on his fellow Eternals by manipulating their memories and causing them to forget who they were. He suggested that he had been subtly adjusting the Eternals' collective memories for the last 100 years or so in build-up to his final plan. Thus, anything Neil Gaiman had wrote about the history of the Eternals was now the real history, and anything that we heard before in the Marvel Universe that contradicted it was because of Sprite's manipulations. On the other hand, a lot of this lore came from Icarus at the beginning of the series before he shrugged off Sprite's memory wipe entirely, struggling to remember the truth. So even then, what we were hearing in Neil Gaiman's story may not have been fully accurate either. The idea was that when the Celestials first came to Earth, they created a static number of about 100 Eternals. Whereas Icarus or Circe were previously referred to as third or fourth generation Eternals, in this new retcon, they were present with their race from the beginning. And these Eternals, they seem to be cosmically powered just like they are now, with no acknowledgement made of Cronus' experiments, Mentor and the Titan colony, the Uranian colony, or how any of that might fit into this new ideal. Also, here's some new wrinkles in the Eternals' background. The Eternals, they can truly die. They can, but the machine has resurrection protocols. See, when an Eternal dies, they use an activation chamber that's located under the South Pole. Eternals who die are returned to the Great Machine, which places them in the activation chamber in order to revive and restore them back to life. The only problem is that for every Eternal resurrected, a Deviant had to die. But eventually this process evolved to replace the Deviants with humans, so now humans die whenever an Eternal is brought back to life. The activation chamber was of great importance when Cronus' cosmic energy experiment destroyed all of Titanos. See, what actually happened there was that all the Eternals were killed and went back into the Great Machine. And the anomaly generated in the explosion is what activated their cosmic potential, their ability to manipulate their cosmically enhanced life forces. But they had to be killed and reborn several times in the chamber before they were stable enough to be returned back out into the world. Lastly, while the South Pole serves as a resurrection spot for the Eternals, it's also a prison for them. The exclusion, as it's called, is where Eternals are incarcerated for making costly mistakes or errors during their lives. Some people never escape exclusion at all. Anyway, the Great Machine, the Activation Chamber, and Exclusion, they've been active since the first Celestial host. Also, in this history, it's revealed that Eternals, they cannot breed at all. And what we saw with Mentor and Suisan, the reason they were able to breed and have Thanos and Star Fox was because of the role of the quantum bands. The exact role of the quantum bands in the process is unclear, but when they got married, Mentor's father, Cronus, he forged the quantum bands into wedding bands for them, and allowing them to overcome this inhibition of not being able to breed. See, Mentor asked Cronus for his power, the power of the firmament, and Cronus provided them with the bands, but it's not clear if the bands themselves did something or merely acted as conduits for Cronus' power. But known history of the quantum bands suggests that they are substantially older than any Eternal from Earth. Now, the previous history indicated that the Eternals of Earth were a more powerful cosmic branch of the species, irradiated and enhanced by Cronus' final experiment after the exiles left for Uranus and the first Titan colonies. But it no longer seems as if Cronus' experiment had any effect on his people. Anyway, and also, the populations of Uranus and Titan, they've always been curiously large. The original tales from the first volume of What If about Uranus' exile showed that he had less than 20 followers that were ultimately spread across 2 colonies on that planet. And modern Titan and the Uranus of Marvel Boys era both seem to be more populated than that. But we've now clarified that the original colonists of Titan all wound up back in the Great Machine, including Uranus himself, after the Titan Civil War, which Suisan survived. The second Titan colony, founded by Mentor and Suisan, was therefore founded by Eternals genetics biotechnology, with clones, biological constructs, and alien colonists arriving over the course of Mentor's experiments. This makes sense, as characters like Genesis' mother, that's Legacy, Captain Marvel's son, his mother, Elysius, was already acknowledged as being artificially created in some way. But outside of Mentor's immediate family, the population of Titan, they may be Eternal-like, but they're not part of the machine. Uranus, they have yet to receive a greater explanation. They too may have reproduced through the propagation of genetic experiments, and several named Eternals from the Marvel Boys stories of Uranus were not identified in the Big 100 list of Eternals number 1. So it's unclear at this point whether Uranus' original followers were among those killed by the native Uranians as described in the Agents of Atlas series, or if they had died and returned to the Great Machine prior to that. That's the history of the Eternals right there. Like I said, forget whatever you saw in the movies. Join me next week as I... Just join me next week, you'll see. Hawkeye, baby. What?